Namaskar. In this video, I like to talk about institution building. Who gets the credit? We have seen in our country many great institutions that have been started by some great leaders. Some of the institutions are identified with people who built them and call them as institution builders. Uday Parikh took institution building to a new level by writing a book, Beyond Management, where he said building institutions is of much greater level contribution than being a leader of a group or a community or anything. In my book on effective people, I have concluded all effective people who contributed to either their profession or to a cause ended up as institution builders. Institutions live much longer than individuals. Take the case of organizations like the Indian Institute of Management or the Indian Institute of Technology. Since I have experienced it as a member of the Indian Institute of Management at Ahmedabad and the Indian Society for Applied Behavioral Science and the Ahmedabad Management Association and a number of other organizations, including the National HRD Network and the Academy of HRD, I can share some insights that I have gained and some questions I have. As far as the Indian Institute of Management Ahmedabad is concerned, we always take pride in saying that Vikram Sarabhai is responsible for building this institution. Of course, much more than Vikram Sarabhai, we talk about Professor Ravi Mathai, who was the first full-time director. And he is known for actually operationalizing the IIMA Ahmedabad and setting it in a way that it could fulfill the dreams of Vikram Sarabhai and others who conceptualized it. Vikram Sarabhai was the master designer, was honorary director for the first few years, located a good director, a young director like Ravi Mathai, and also instituted a participative culture. Ravi Mathai built on it and made a great contribution, and after 7 years working as director, left the institute voluntarily. But before he left, he constituted a committee to review the impact of the institute and set new directions. And while the committee was deliberating, he announced his resignation. And he said that I've done my job, but somebody else should give it a new shape and take it forward. Great institution builder. I think this has set precedents for many other institutions, because many institution builders who came later and built institutions quote Ravi Mathai as an example and say that one should not possess an institution. One should empower the faculty, empower the students, empower the staff, and can retire from the institute as a director but continue as a professor and not influence the decisions and leave the rest of the people to be doing whatever they are meant to do. I think this is a great quality of an institution builder. We must look at, when we look at IIM Ahmedabad or for that matter any of the IIMs, we not only look at the people who conceptualized it, who articulated the mission, articulated the culture, articulated norms, operationalized it, and led a life in such a way that all the stakeholders, which include the faculty, the staff, the students, the alumni and others, internalize the values and culture of the institution. I think this has happened very much in an organization like ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization, and I would assume not only in ISRO or all the organizations which were founded by Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. That's the reason why Dr. Sarabhai stands out as a great institution builder. Ravi Mathai also stands out as a great institution builder, though he has not articulated the vision of IIM, but he has operationalized it and he has done a number of things. I think there are people who operationalize, but there are people who continue the traditions. If we say Ravi Mathai and Vikram Sarabhai are the only institution builders. What happens to all those faculty who have worked very hard, internalized the norms, contributed to it, and maybe, if necessary, sacrificed some of their own personal conveniences to build this as a great institution? How about the students who worked hard? How about the alumni who have brought a good name for the institution? How about all the community that has supported it, like the industry in Ahmedabad that supported it, the government, the state government and the central government who supported it, at least at some of the stages and things like that. So, institution building is never a one person job. While that person is very important, you have to bring in a lot of these stakeholders. When I think of IIM Ahmedabad itself, I also give great credit to each one of the directors after Ravi Mathai. I think Samuel Paul maintained the traditions and he created and he nurtured the same culture which I think Ravi Mathai thought of it. The same thing with Professor Vyas, and I have a story how Dr. I.G. Patel, who came from bureaucracy, I think in a short time changed his own style, internalized the culture and contributed to the culture of IIM Ahmedabad. I will also credit to him. So instead of, while he had an opportunity to totally dismantle the culture of IIM Ahmedabad, Dr. I.G. Patel nurtured the culture, contributed to it and changed himself. Isn't he a great institution builder? And how about in a silent way, people like Professor Narayan Sheth, or after Narayan Sheth, Professor Khandwala, after Khandwala, Jahar Saha, or Bakal Dholakia, who has conceptualized the new campus and did a lot of things, and Samir Barua, and after Samir Barua, the person who came from Harvard, Ashish Nanda, and Errol D'Souza, and now Bhaskar. I think each one of them had their own share in building the institution. At least, I think one can say with confidence, they nurtured the values, they nurtured the culture, they continued. Each one may have added something of their own. Why only the directors? What happens to all the deans and the chairman of various programs? There is a fellow program, which is the doctoral program, which is completing 50 years. In the earlier years, Professor Rangarajan was the chairman of this. Later, I think a number of others gave new directions to it. So each chairperson of a major activity like the fellow program or the postgraduate program or people who started new centers like the Public Systems Group or Ravi Mathai Center and so on and so forth. Each one of them are also institution builders. I'm sure the way the computers group later converted itself and kept itself in tune with changing developments by nurturing, I think, innovations and doing a lot of things, I think also is worth mentioning. The Center for Management in Agriculture and so on. Alumni, students. So the same thing happens when you look at an organization. You look at a professional body like the Indian Society for Applied Behavioral Science. ISABS was conceptualized sometime in 1970, 69-70, by a group of people who went to NTL at Bethel. And while they were going through the training there, in sensitivity training or T group, they all thought that why do we have to come here to learn about group process and individual interpersonal process and organization development? Why don't we have our own institution? So people like Uday Parikh, Somnath Chattopadhyay, Abad Ahmad, Prayag Mehta, Francis Menegis, Manohar Nadkarni, Dharani Sinha, Pulin Garg, and Gauranga Chattopadhyay, Sujit Bhattacharya, K.J. Christopher. There are a whole lot of people who, and their experiences are well documented in an article by Somnath in a book, HRD, OD and Institution Building, written in memory of Uday Parikh. I think is a great, but one important lesson from Somnath's article is that you should look at the circumstances existing at the time when institution is conceptualized. Now if you look at India in 1950s, 1955, 400 million population, 5,000 blocks, and each block headed by a block development officer. Each block development officer had approximately about 10 employees called as extension educators to disseminate agriculture practices, animal husbandry, health, and a whole lot of other kind of things. All of them needed to be leaders in community development. How do you build 5,000 multiplied by 10 leaders? I think this was a question which government of India in those years was struggling with. It is at this point of time a World Youth Council conceptualized building leaders for community development purposes, and that is where Ralph Linton comes into picture. I think they identified Ralph Linton and Ollie Linton to develop youth as future leaders in community development. I think that is where in 1954 to 1959, about 3 to 4 years, Ralph Linton and Ronnie worked in both India and Ceylon, Sri Lanka, at the time known as Ceylon, and developed a methodology of building young leaders who believe in community development, who acted by themselves, who I think did something like action research, learnt about themselves for self-discovery, interpersonal competence, community building, and using group as a process of bringing in change. I think this is very well described in the Aloka experience. This happened until 1960, when the small industry extension training institutes were started, and Ralph Linton came as a Ford Foundation consultant to SIUT Institute, and it was during his stay at SIUT Institute he got a number of the faculty to be developed as resources by sending them to NTL. In addition, I think he replicated the Aloka experience in urban India, Attira, I think to begin with, and later in many other cities across the world. I think Dr. Sarabhai encouraged him to do this in urban India and so on. So this is the backdrop of formation of a Society for Applied Behavioral Science. It is these people who were sponsored by SIIT Institute, IIM Ahmedabad and IIM Calcutta, and also Larsen & Toubro as a company, who conceptualized and created a Society for Applied Behavioral Science. Only some names get known, some other names don't get to be known. But these people all mattered in terms of starting off ISABS. But ISABS was not a body which was just started by a few people and then that is the end of the story. I think 4 or 5 years after, 6 years I think after it started, it went through a major crisis. And in fact, the body had to be shut down for some time because of conflicts among some of the staff. And a new body started by some others. But this body was revived. Now, how about those who revived the body? And a new constitution was conceptualized. I think sometime in the year 1986, I had the opportunity to take over and implement the new constitution as the president of ISABS. I was not at all involved except that I went through some of the programs of ISABS. But I came in as a president and did a few things. And after that, I got again disengaged. And I must say, I'm not one of those heavily engaged in ISABS. But ISABS is a great institution. It has recently celebrated its 50 years of its existence. How about all those deans who contributed its growth? Various presidents or executive directors who contributed its growth? Participants who disseminated it? The professional members who... So if you look at who built ISABS, it is not just a few people who conceptualized it, but it is every single person who performed the role of a dean or a president or a professional member of a committee, rejuvenated, etc., etc. So I think it raises a very important question. If an institution gets built over a period of time, whom should we give credit? I would like to recommend that institution building is a process. It's a product at a given point of time. But I think we should learn to acknowledge all those who are involved in making it what it is, including those who may have withdrawn and have contributed in their own way and so on. So friends, this video is meant to mainly say institution building is never a one-person job. A large number of people are involved. while we should recognize those who mattered more, we should recognize everyone who contributed to it, even in a small way. I think those of you who contribute to the institution or a professional body in which you are involved take pride in the little contribution you make. Thank you and all the best for great institution building.